We are admitting 165 people right now. Okay, guys, we're letting everyone in. Here we go. Hi, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. So we're little by little admitting everyone. Okay, this is a very special moment. All right, we are admitting about 200 families. So it will be very busy at Kweller today.
Olga, can you maximize your window so we can get it in landscape mode?
Let me see.
Right, that's better.
Good.
Okay, I can start whenever you want.
Sure, we're going to get started in just one moment. Okay, let me just get a few more in and then we're going to get started. Just one moment. Okay, hold on. Okay, everyone. I'm going to take care of the admit room. Okay. Let me make sure we're recording. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy that we are participating in this webinar right now. We are ready to go for the SHSAT, which will begin as of November 8th, 2023. And then the following weekends, they will also be offering this exam for students who are not in New York City public schools. This will be a weekend exam as well. So please keep that in mind too. We're looking forward to having all of you participate and benefit from Kweller Prep's webinar. All right, we're going to begin in just one moment. I just want to quickly tell you that we're very proud of you. We're very happy that you are here, that you are participating in this. And we also want to just share with you that Kweller Prep is going to offer a wide variety of classes, workshops, and webinars until the exam. There's something else on September 20th. Keep that in mind as well. We're looking forward to having a great webinar and workshop right now. Olga is going to lead the slides and annotate them, and Kenny will begin. Without further ado, I'd like to get started. I'm very thankful that you're doing this, that we're all participating, and we're going to be moving full speed ahead until the test. Kweller Prep has a reading cram we've sent you information about. We also have a math cram we've sent you information about. So keep that in mind, that we will have a series of very helpful programs until the test. With that being said, Kenny, you're able to introduce yourself and you can begin the webinar. Okay, thank you very much. Without further ado.
Thank you. All right, so I'm Kenny Tan. I've been tutoring students for the SHSAT since 2010. And the SHSAT since 2018 has had a poetry section, which we're going to be focusing on tonight. So if we could move to the next slide. Okay, so just to start off, this is going to be a list of 20 literary terms. It looks like on the slide that you see in front of you, some of them are cut off at the bottom there. But I'll go through each one of these terms and then define them for you. So a character is a person or animal who takes part in a story. A conflict is a problem between conflict between characters or a struggle within a character. Dialogue is a conversation between characters. Imagery is the use of words and phrases that provide information about what someone may see, hear, feel, touch, or taste. Irony is a surprising contradiction or contrast. Metaphor is a comparison of two things that do not use the words like or as. A moral is a lesson that the author hopes readers will learn from the story. Personification is the use of words or phrases that give a non-human subject human characteristics. A plot is the sequence of events in a story. Point of view is a particular attitude about something. Rhyme is the repetition of sounds at the end of words. Setting is the time and place of a story.
I'm just gonna
Similarly,
take one moment just to raise the screen because we can't all just see all the literary terms. So let's just raise it. So that we for some reason can't see the bottom half. So let's just make sure that we can do that now.
They're
uh,
cut off. I'll just keep adding them. 1 second.
Yeah, or we
okay,
can just leave it for now. Just go, if you could go to the main packet.
we can just keep a running list on the notepad here.
Yeah,
So
sure.
after personification was plot, and then point of view, rhyme. So rhyme is the repetition of sounds at the end of words. Setting is the time and place of a story. Simile is a comparison of two things that uses like or as. The speaker is the narrator or character who tells the story. A stanza is a group of lines in a poem. Structure is the order and format of a passage or a poem. A symbol is something that is used to represent a particular idea. The theme is the overall idea, moral, or lesson that the author wants the reader to understand. The tone is an attitude that a writer chooses to show to readers using specific words and phrases. And the turning point is a specific moment in a story when something begins to change. So going to the next slide, some tips for SHSAT poetry. As you read the poem to yourself, ask yourself, what is the poem about? Who is the speaker in the poem, if there is a speaker? How does the poem make me feel? How would I describe the mood? In my own words, what does the poem mean? And what is the poet trying to teach me? And then the next slide, whenever you're ready. So to begin the questions for tonight, I want to show everyone this poem that appeared in not just Kweller Prep's SHSAT poetry textbook, but it also appeared on a practice test from the College Board's digital SAT, which will be coming out in the United States next year. So the question says, the following text is adapted from William Shakespeare's 1609 poem, Sonnet 27. The poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. And the poem reads, weary with toil, I hurry to my bed, the dear repose for limbs with travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head to work my mind when body's works expired. For then my thoughts, from far where I abide, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee, and keep my drooping eyelids open wide. And the question is, what is the main idea of the text? So our choices are, the speaker is asleep and dreaming about traveling to see the friend. The speaker is planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. The speaker is too fatigued to continue a discussion with the friend. And lastly, the speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. So I'll give a few seconds to everyone to think about which answer choice you would choose here, and then I'll reveal the answer. So the correct answer for this question is actually choice D. D is the correct answer because it most accurately states the main idea of the text. The speaker begins the experience of being weary and tired and going to bed to seek dear repose. That means sleep. But instead of sleeping, the speaker is kept awake. The poem says, keeping my drooping eyelids open wide. The speaker is kept awake by thoughts of a friend. And we see that in the part where it says, my thoughts begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee. So just to explain why the other answer choices are incorrect here, choice A is incorrect because the text makes it clear that the speaker is not asleep. Thoughts about the friend are keeping the speaker awake. Choice B is incorrect because the speaker is not talking about taking a literal trip when referring to a zealous pilgrimage. Rather, the speaker is referring to the experience of thinking about the friend, of taking a journey in my head. And choice C is incorrect because the text indicates that the speaker and the friend are not in the same place and having a conversation. Rather, the speaker is at home and thinking of the friend who is somewhere else, from far where I abide. So at the end of the presentation tonight, I'll be including a link in the chat to where you can find more of these practice questions that were written by the College Board for the digital SAT, but are just as useful as for preparing for the SHSAT poetry. So now the next slide, some common item stems. And when I say item stems, I mean common types of questions that you'll see on the poetry section. So to begin, the most common type of question would be the rhetorical strategy questions. With the rhetorical strategy questions, you need to be familiar with the most common types of answer choices. So the answer choices will often use words like introduce, establish, reveal, show, suggest, imply, support, emphasize, highlight, or contrast. So you should be familiar with what each of those words means, because that will be necessary for you to understand the answer choices. So some common ways rhetorical strategy questions begin. They can ask, how does the similar construction of the sentence in line blank and the sentence in line blank contribute to the meaning of the poem? Or how do the lines contribute to the development of a central idea of the poem? Or how does the line contribute to the development of ideas in the stanza? When you're answering these rhetorical strategy questions, remember that the context matters. So if a question references a specific line number, you'll want to not just go back to that one line or set of lines, but you'll want to make sure to read the entire sentence that includes that line, because the context matters. And the next slide, whenever we're ready. So more examples of rhetorical strategy questions. How does isolating the word blank in line blank affect the meaning of the poem? How does the poet develop the points of view of the blank and the blank? And read line blank and line blank from the poem. The parallel structure of those two lines does blank. So when you're answering questions like these, again, you will always want to go back to the poem to find the evidence that you can use to eliminate the incorrect answer choices and then confirm the correct answer. You'll also want to look for literary devices, such as personification. The correct answer will probably be something that the poet does throughout the poem and not just in one specific part of the poem. And remember to read the entire answer choice. If any part of an answer is incorrect, that means that entire answer choice is incorrect. So the next slide, whenever we're ready.
Sorry.
Okay, so more examples of rhetorical strategy questions. They can begin as, how do the details in the blank stanza, lines blank through blank, contribute to the development of the theme of the poem? Or how do the lines help convey the speaker's point of view? Or what is the purpose of the repeated words blank in lines blank and blank? Or what impact does the phrase blank in line blank have in the poem? So when you're answering a question like the first one in this list here, you want to look for details that fit a common theme. Remember that the distractors, meaning the wrong answers, will not be supported by the poem and may be too extreme. So just a few more examples of rhetorical strategy questions. These can include the lines help develop the central idea of the poem by revealing the speaker's blank, or the main purpose of the comparison in lines blank through blank of the poem is to show blank, or the speaker refers to familiar objects and events in the lines most likely to blank. And then the next type of question that you'll see is the set of literal comprehension questions. And these can include the blank stanza in lines blank through blank conveys a central idea of the poem by, or the description in the blank stanza lines blank through blank helps establish a central idea of the poem by, or possibly read line blank from the poem, and that line helps develop the theme of the poem by suggesting that the blank. So when you're answering these literal comprehension questions, try to translate the poem into your own words. As you're reading the poem for the first time, you should be annotating the poem in the margins, trying to summarize each stanza as you go along. And that's going to help, that roadmap is going to help you answer these literal comprehension questions. So the next slide has more examples of literal comprehension questions. These can include, how does the poet develop the speaker's point of view in the blank stanza, or the blank in the poem represent the speaker's blank, or what does the word choice in these lines convey about the speaker, or read lines blank through blank from the poem, how does this memory affect the speaker? So when you're answering these literal comprehension questions, instead of looking for what appears to be a good answer, you should be trying to look for reasons to eliminate all the incorrect answers. Those incorrect answers are usually going to be misinterpretations of the poem and or too extreme. So the supporting evidence questions, that's the next slide. Supporting evidence questions can begin as, which line from the poem best supports the idea that blank, or which detail from the poem reflects the speaker's view that blank, or read lines blank through blank from the poem, which of the following supports what is implied in these lines. Now, questions like the first two that you see on this list can actually help you to understand the poem. So if after reading the poem for the first time, you're still not 100% sure what the poem was actually about, you can actually look to the questions, especially these supporting evidence questions, to give you further clues or hints about what the meaning of the poem was. Now, the answer choices to these supporting evidence questions will always be quotes from the poem. So when you answer these supporting evidence questions, try to understand what each quote actually means, and then make sure that your final answer is relevant to the question that was being asked. And then the next slide. So form questions can begin as, how does the form of the poem contribute to its meaning? Or the break between the second stanza and the third stanza serves as a transition from. When answering these form questions, look at the shape of the poem. For example, are the stanzas on alternating sides of the page, which could highlight opposing points of view? Or perhaps the poem uses creative line spacing that could be used to remind the reader of the shape of a particular object or animal. For transition-related questions, make sure you understand the ideas before and after the transition. And you also want to be familiar with the most common types of transition words or phrases that indicate particular types of relationships. These transitions often fall into categories like continuers, or cause and effect, or contrast. And lastly, one type of question that you may see in the poetry section is a question that has to do with italics. The use of italics on the word blank in line blank is most likely intended to emphasize the blank. So that's an example of italics question that appeared on a practice SHSAT section in the past. And italics can indicate the extremity of a characteristic of the word that is being italicized. So the next slide has a list of poetry resources that students should take advantage of when preparing for the poetry questions that appear on the SHSAT. So of course, you want to complete all of the official SHSAT practice tests starting from 2018 to starting from the year 2018 to 2019. Usually every practice test will have a single poem. In addition, you can take advantage of Kweller's SHSAT poetry textbook. And I will put the link to where you can get that textbook into the chat here so that everyone can see it. And I think one of the hosts may need to repost the message to the general chat.
I'll take care of that right now, okay?
Okay, thank you. In addition, I also encourage students to take advantage of all the digital SAT poetry-related practice questions. And I'll also put the link to where you can find those into the chat as well. And I think one of the hosts will be able to repost that later. And for the last slide, some final tips for SHSAT poetry. You should be completing as many practice questions as possible from the resources that I mentioned previously. Carefully study the answer explanations for the questions that you struggled with or answered incorrectly, and write down what you learned in a notebook. What mistake did you make when answering the questions, and how can you avoid making the same mistake in the future? Those are my final tips for the SHSAT poetry. Do we have any questions in the chat, perhaps, that anyone wants me to answer?
Can you just quickly go over how, this is very important, how the open source poems that you actually put into the Kweller Prep Poetry book? I just want everyone to know these same exact poems appeared in the SHSAT and the SAT digital version. So I just want to make it very clear to you that open source poems are a great way because they coincidentally appeared for SHSAT and SAT. So if you could just elaborate on that, Kenny, that would be great. And then we can wrap up on your end and Olga will proceed.
Sure. So SHSAT poetry, the types of poems that appear in the SHSAT poetry section tend to be more contemporary. Now, the poetry that you'll see on the digital SAT spans an even wider breadth. So some of the questions that you'll see, some of the sample questions that you'll see for the digital SAT go all the way back to Shakespeare with his sonnets. And sometimes you'll even see similar poems on the New York State English regions as well. So all of these poetry questions that you're practicing with right now, they're great preparation, not just for the SHSAT, but also for when you're taking the English regions, and also when you end up taking the digital SAT in a couple of years.
I'm going to put the English regions into the chat also, just because people want extra practice. And I just want to give you guys options for extra practice so you have it as well. Kenny, thank you so much. Can you wish everyone good luck? Because we're going to shift gears right now to do more straight practice problems. Kenny, please wish everyone good luck. I'm going to put you in straight spotlight right now. So for a moment, and then we'll switch back to Olga. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I wish everyone the best of luck on the SHSAT. Remember to take a deep breath if you get nervous during the test. If you feel tired at any point during the test, just rest your eyes for 10 seconds, close your eyelids, cover your eyes with the palms of your hands, count backwards from 10, and you'll feel much more refreshed at that point and in a better state of mind to continue working on the test.
Thank you so much. Thank you for using your brain power and your expertise as a Stuyvesant High School graduate yourself, and as someone who is dedicated towards helping children succeed on this very important examination. Thank you for publishing such a valuable book. Poetry is a really nuanced area. Thank you so much for publishing the book, for writing it. Kenny actually wrote every single word, produced every single page. We're so lucky that you are getting us started on this webinar. So Kenny, thank you. We're going to shift now to Olga. We're going to go through a bunch of practice questions right now. Thank you, Kenny. And you're just really a very special person. We're so lucky that you're in this webinar right now. It really means a lot. Thank you for this fabulous book, and thank you for making it an affordable resource for so many children so that they can study and practice and learn. Thank you, Kenny. All right. Okay, Olga, I'm going to put you into spotlight right now. Hello, Olga. Okay. Welcome. Good.
Hi, guys.
Olga, we're going to get started. I just want to take a moment just to quickly skim what we went over, and then we're going to jump into the test questions. Okay. So SHSAT poetry webinar, let's go through.
Yeah, I just wanted
we're also going to email everyone a set of these slides because they're on GoodNotes right now. So just keep that in mind. We will email you all of this. So Olga's going to continue right now, and we're going to begin by going through what you need to know. So you should know every single SHSAT passage has a poetry. There's one poetry, sometimes there's two. So just get ready for that. So Olga, without further ado, you're going to take over from here.
Okay, hi guys again. I'm gonna take a few minutes, probably maybe like another 15 to 20 minutes just to review everything that Kenny went with us. And just to expand broader, because some of the definitions I just want you guys to have written out in these notes, especially the figurative language devices. And then around 8 o'clock or so, we'll switch gears to doing practice questions. So I pulled the poem from the official SHSAT practice handbook that we were reviewing last week. So we'll go over that poem, and then I have a whole list of extra poems just in case we have extra time. So we'll try to actually show you how everything that Kenny and I'm going to be talking about is used in practice. So how do we take those the figurative language that he talked about and all the terms that he defined for us, how do we actually use those in practice? Okay, so without further ado, I just want to write down some important things for us, and then we'll officially switch to the practice questions. So as Kenny was telling us, one important thing is what we call sort of the poem's form. So we can call this like poem form / structure / rhythm. So this is kind of the very first thing that I notice whenever I am looking at a poem. It's what does the poem look like? So this is what Kenny was telling us. So sometimes a poem will just look like this, but sometimes a poem could look like this. And sometimes the example that Kenny mentioned is a poem could look like this, and then like this, and then like this. So these squiggles are obviously words, but what I'm trying to show you guys and what I'm trying to make you notice is the shape of the poem. So that's one of the very first things that is very obvious. It goes straight into your face. As soon as you open a poem, it looks like something, right? And the reason why we teach you this is because its form is important, because we can signify lots of different things based on the shape of the poem. So who remembers the example that Kenny just gave us? What was his example with the shape of the poem? Yeah, good. So somebody's putting it in the chat. So in some cases, the shape of the poem could signify two opposing parties talking to each other, right? Having a conversation. So that could be one example here. So two parties communicating. And another example, the shape of the poem can actually be about what the poem is about. So I think there's a very famous poem that showed up on the SHSAT 2 or 3 years ago, if my memory serves me right. And the whole thing was about a snake, and it was in the shape of a snake, right? So this is two parties communicating or opposing views, as you guys said. And then sometimes it's in the shape of what it's about. So this might be like in the shape of a snake. So the shape of the poem is very important. It's one of the very first things that we look at. The next things that that Kenny was talking about was not just the shape of the poem, but also different ways that we can emphasize words. So he talked about italics. So that's one big thing. Another thing that I want you guys to focus on is capitalization. So what kind of words do we normally in English grammar capitalize?
Everyone, you can type any answers you want into the chat box as well, okay?
What do we capitalize? If I write down my name, Olga, that is something that I'm going to capitalize. If I write down that we live in New York City, that's something that I'm going to capitalize. Sure, months, all of that, good. So what we call this is proper nouns. So that we all know. But what I want to guide your attention to is sometimes in poems, they capitalize things that are not proper nouns. And that is something that you guys need to pay attention to, because you have to think, well, why is the author capitalizing this? So a lot of times we see this with like natural elements. So a lot of times I see authors capitalize something like son, or I see authors capitalize something like mother. So the reasons for this capitalization is always something for you guys to think about. You should, anytime you notice a word capitalized that's not a proper noun, the author of the poem is doing that with a purpose. So it's your job to sit there and think, what is the purpose, right? I have to figure it out. And on top of that, most likely they're going to ask you a question about it. So my goal is to teach you guys to anticipate the questions before you even get to the questions. That's how good you're going to be. You're going to be almost as good as the people in the DOE that are writing this test, because you're going to anticipate, you're going to see them capitalize something that's improper, and you're going to know that they're going to ask you about it. So what are some reasons why we can capitalize something improper? So whenever you guys notice capitalization, it could be for emphasis. So the purpose could be to emphasize something. The purpose could also be to personify. So I'm going to define all the literary devices for you shortly on the next page, but this is something that Kenny already defined for us. In personification, we give human-like qualities to things that are not human. So an example of that is capitalizing things, because son is not a person. It's not a name that we would capitalize. But if I want to humanize the son, if I want to make the son a character or something like that, I would capitalize it. So that's another thing that I want you guys to think about. And then italics is up here also. That's one that Kenny mentioned. That could be used for emphasis. So all of this kind of goes into like structural elements of the poem that we often look at and think about. And then the other things that are important, just to mention here, so our notes are complete, is things like punctuation. So in poems, punctuation becomes really important. So where we put our periods, where we put our commas, periods, commas, exclamation points, question marks, whether those punctuations are in the middle of the line or at the end of the line, because punctuation is a break. That's the way that the poem or the author of the poem is telling you, here's a pause, right? So it's important because you should always think, why is the author deciding to put a break in the middle of a stanza? Why doesn't he wait until the end of the stanza? What is he trying to communicate by putting these pieces of punctuation here? So that's why punctuation is really, really important. And you should think about placement of the punctuation. It's different than in prose. And prose, what I mean by prose is just regular essays and journal articles, because those are, the punctuation is very predictable. But in a poem, they can use all of this punctuation, capitalization, italics, the shape. It's all these extra creative outlets for the author of the poem to communicate with you that we don't get in prose. So that's why we teach you guys to pay attention to all of these different things in order to catch all of these things that they're telling us. And then the last thing that has to do with structure in a poem is rhyming schemes. So there's different types of poems that we can talk about and learn about. So we learned about, we saw the sonnet, that Kenny showed us an example of. You could also see haikus. So these are very common structures of poems, but in general, you guys should just pay attention to rhyming. Which lines rhyme? Is there a pattern? That's the most important thing with poems. And in writing and test taking in general, you want to look for patterns. So is there a pattern? And more importantly, when does the pattern break if it does? Because if it does break, you have to think why. And oftentimes in poems, the authors will break the pattern at some important point in the poem, at some sort of turning point, something really, really important to emphasize that something is changing. Does that make sense? So it's really important for you guys to notice these pattern breaks. So I'm going to write down pattern break may signify turning point. And not every single poem will rhyme. And not every single poem will use capitalization in strange ways. And not every single poem will use italics. And not every single poem will have a different form. So these can all be mixed and matched. But it's important that we teach and you guys know all of them. So whatever they throw at you on test day, you're prepared for. Okay, so this is kind of page 1 of the notes. I tried to summarize a lot of the things that Kenny and I think that are important. So this is everything that has to do with form, structure, and rhythm. There's 2 more pages of notes that I want to go through, and then we'll jump to practice, okay? So the next page of notes that I want to think about is comprehension with you. So this is a huge one, right? Because we definitely want to understand the poem. So comprehension is all about theme, main idea, what is the poem actually telling me? Like, what am I supposed to take away from the poem? So one thing that can help us with this, we already talked about the form of the poem, but let's say the form of the poem isn't helping us. Another obvious thing that we can look for is the title. So the title oftentimes gives us away the topic. I always remind my students to read the title. The next thing that we can think about is the point of view. So in order to understand what the poem is about, what helps us is who is speaking. If you notice, a lot of the common questions that were on Kenny's slide were either about the main idea or the theme or about the person speaking, the speaker. So those are 2 big kind of realms that we have to understand in order to answer the questions well. So point of view is who is speaking. And what helps me a lot, and what I always teach my students to do with point of view, is look at the pronouns. The pronouns can tell us what the point of view of the poem is. So if you see a lot of personal pronouns, if you see words like I, me, my, we, all of these are personal pronouns. And all of these words are going to tell us that the poem is written from first person point of view, right? So I'm telling you a personal story about myself. That's why I'm saying I'm saying me, I'm saying my. So that's a very different story than when you have a third person narrator who's just telling a general story, and this third person narrator kind of knows all the different characters, right? So those are 2 very different realms. And these are important strategies that you guys should use for your regular reading comprehension skills as well. Because when you see that an essay is written from a personal point of view, that is very different, sort of pulling at your emotions and telling a story in a much more personal way than when you get a third person narrative. So that's one thing that I always pay attention to. So let's write that down. So we'll say first person versus third person. And with these pronouns, it's words like he, she, they, stuff like that. Another thing that's really important for comprehension that I always teach my students is connotation. So there's a difference between connotation and denotation. So let's define that. So a connotation is the meaning of a word that is implied. And implied is a very, very, very important word here. And this is very separate from its literal definition, which is called the denotation. So I want you guys to walk away from here knowing the difference between these two words, connotation versus denotation. And denotation is just the definition of the word, right? A word is a word. Each word has a denotation, each word has a meaning. Connotation is different. Connotation can be positive, it can be negative, it can be neutral. And words can have a very similar denotation, but opposite connotations. So let me show you what I mean using examples. So let's make ourselves a little table with negative, neutral, and positive. And if I write here a word visitor, that's pretty neutral, right? Visitor is just implying that somebody is in your home who does not live there, or somebody is around you who is not from that place that they are from, right? So somebody's visiting New York, for example, or I have a visitor in my home. Now, can I make that positive? I can say something like guest. Guest suggests that I invited somebody, right? It's a little bit more positive than just saying I have a visitor, saying I have a guest. That implies a more personal touch to it, that I wanted somebody over, I invited them. That's why they are my guest. And then if I wanted to make it very obviously negative, I could say something like intruder, right? So again, intruder is somebody who's in my home, he doesn't live there, but intruder has a very distinctly negative connotation to it compared to visitor, which is more neutral, and guest, which is more positive. So this is a very basic example that I sort of thought to include in this lesson to kind of show you guys how strong connotations can be. But oftentimes it's a little bit more subtle. And we do this all the time in our speech. Our brain chooses certain words, right? Or when you're writing an essay, or when you're talking to somebody, your brain chooses certain words. And we have a bunch of words up here that we can choose from. So how do we make those small, subtle distinctions? And the poem makers are going to make those distinctions as well. So it's your job to look at the nouns and think, why did the author pick this word? Is the author trying to convince me of something more positive? Is their opinion of this more positive, or is their opinion of this more negative, or is it just net neutral? And that's your job to figure out. And connotation helps us figure out a lot of what the poem is about and what the speaker's sort of intent and point of view is. And then the other thing with comprehension is just using context and understanding the meaning of words. So vocabulary always is a big thing for any English exam that you're taking. You have to keep up your vocabulary, but oftentimes, even when you don't know the vocab word, you can use context to help you figure out what the author is saying. And we saw Kenny do this with the example that he showed before, where we didn't know what a word meant, but because of the way that the question was worded and because of the other words around, we understood that the poem was about sleep. Okay. So this is the big page on comprehension. Now, the last sort of thing I want to talk to you guys about is figurative language and transitions. And then we're going to go ahead and look at some real SHSAT poems and try to take everything that we've learned and apply it. Okay, so just bear with me for one more page of notes, and then we'll be more interactive and we'll try to do a poem together.
And you can take screenshots of this, but we also are going to email you, everyone who's in the meeting, we're going to email all of you a copy of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put this together along with Kenny's slides, and I'll send it all to Mrs. Francis afterwards, and she'll send this out to you guys.
Yeah, and I just want to remind all of you, the webinar will go until 9 o'clock because we made a decision to extend. We want to go over practice questions. So we're going to dedicate 8 to 9 p.m. for practice questions. So sit tight. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so figurative language. So a lot of these words were on Kenny's list, but I just want to make sure that you guys have clear definitions of what all of these figurative language devices are. along with examples. So it's really important that you don't just know the definition of a simile, because a poem is never going to just ask you what the definition is. They're going to give you a simile, and it's your job to be able to identify that that is a simile, or that is a metaphor, or that is personification. And more importantly, it's your job to think, why a simile here, right? What does a simile add? Why did the author use a simile? Or why personification here? What does that add? Does that make sense? Because oftentimes the questions are not just going to be like, which literary device is this? It's going to be like, what does this do to the poem, right? What is this used to communicate? So I want to take that extra step for you guys and show you what most of these literary devices are sort of used for, okay? So let's start with simile. So who can tell me what a simile is? Somebody put in the chat what the definition of a simile is.
Please type in if you could.
Yeah, somebody just said like or as, but what does it actually mean? Absolutely, you need to use the words like or as. But what is it? Yeah, good. Somebody got it. So it's a comparison. That's the important part. It's a comparison of two things, and it uses like or as. Absolutely. So okay. And now let's think of some examples of similes. We can say her smile was as bright as the sun. And now the last part. Why would an author use, why would the author use a simile? So to show a comparison, absolutely. The comparisons make it easier for the reader to connect with the subject matter. That's the point. And they provide some familiar reference points to understand the poem's intended feeling, right? So if I say her smile was bright, versus her smile was as bright as the sun, you could see the difference between those two examples. As bright as the sun, I'm giving you guys a picture, right? You guys get to see an image to show exactly what I mean by that. Because you can be bright as a traffic light, you can be bright as the sun, you could be bright as the luminescent lighting in a hospital. So bright itself is not descriptive enough. But when I use a simile or a comparison or any one of these figurative devices, I'm putting in an intended image or feeling into your brain. And by choosing a word like bright as the sun, I'm communicating not only the brightness of the sun, but the sun also evokes all these other images, right? It evokes warmth. When we talked about connotation, denotation, the sun is a very positive word. So within that one simile, even though I'm just comparing her smile to the sun, I'm also communicating all these other things. I'm communicating warmth. I'm communicating that this is a positive word, and I'm putting an image and associated feelings into the brain of my readers. So that's the important part. So let's write all of that down. And again, just to make these notes super obvious for you, I'm going to annotate sun, positive connotation, associated with not just brightness, but warmth. All right, let's do the next one. The next one is very similar. It's very, it's almost the same thing. It's a metaphor. What is the difference between a metaphor and a simile? Yeah, absolutely.
Look at what a smart group we have. They all know the answers.
I
I
know.
love it. I love
They,
it.
they barely
We're
need.
so lucky.
So
They don't
it's
even need us. Look at how smart they are.
exactly. So this is also a direct comparison, but this does not need like or as. So in terms of purpose, it's very, very similar to a simile. So I'm not going to write all that down again. But I want you guys to know that it's a little bit more direct. So it's a little bit more like a little bit of a coarser literary device. It's more direct. So the tone in the poem might be a little bit different in an author that chooses to use a metaphor rather than a simile. And some examples for you guys. We can say something like, his heart is a stone. So without using like or as, we're being very, very direct. We're saying is. So it's just more direct or coarse than a simile. Okay. The next one that I want to talk about is personification, which again, you guys heard both me and Kenny talk about as well. Somebody define personification for me in the chat. Good. Somebody said human-like description, given human qualities to non-human objects. Good. So it's giving human qualities to something that's non-human. Absolutely. And usually what I see authors do this with is like natural elements. So they'll do things like wind or storms or stars. So oftentimes when you guys see something like that, that can confirm to you like, oh yeah, this is definitely personification. And some examples for you guys. We can say the wind whispered through the trees. And just to be perfectly clear here, this is the personification, right? That the wind whispered, because the wind doesn't actually whisper, right? The wind can't actually talk. So why do you guys think, what is the purpose of using personification?
You can type the answer in the chat. We see what you're typing in.
Yeah, so somebody said to give life as an adjective.
Olga, look at how smart they are. You're so intelligent. You're going to be teaching this webinar when Olga and I are in Canes. Okay. You're taking over the company, guys. We're done. We're retiring. You're so smart. Excellent answers. Excellent.
Absolutely. To make to create new life. Yes. To give life.
Excellent. Hussein,
Which makes
David,
things
you can
more
lead. Next webinar, you're running it.
Other things is by humanizing things that are non-human, we make them more relatable, more emotionally resonant. So we can say, so we make non-human things more relatable, which helps us connect as readers on a more personal level. And very, very, very oftentimes this is done to natural like elements. Okay, just a few more important ones that I want to go through, and then we'll jump to practice. The next one is hyperbole. What's a hyperbole? Hyperbole is something that we do. Yeah, somebody said really, I like that. An egregious exaggeration. Yeah, it's an over exaggeration. And we do this all the time in our speech. So when you come home and you say something like, I'm as hungry as a horse, or if your sister's annoying you and asking you the same questions and you said, I already told you a million times. So all of those are very common examples of hyperbole because they're over exaggerations. So for example, I've told you a million times. So you didn't actually say something a million times, but you're saying that you did using this device hyperbole. And why would somebody do that? Why would an author do that? Why do we do that in our speech?
I know one. The sky is falling. Hyperbole.
Yes, good. It's for emphasis.
+1 Kweller.
It's for emphasis. It's for intensity. So that's why we would do that. Good. What it does is it magnifies the feeling or the situation, right? Because if you think about yourself, why I would tell you, I've told you a million times already. The reason that I'm saying it like that is because I have a lot of big feelings, right? I'm annoyed that I have to repeat myself so many times. So when the author decides to use something like hyperbole, what they're doing is they're drawing the reader's attention to magnify the feeling, to magnify the situation in some way. So we can also add magnify feeling / situation, draw attention. Okay, so that's hyperbole. There's plenty more devices, but there's just a few more that I want to cover for our purposes before we get to practice questions. Let's do, this one doesn't come up so often. This is onomatopoeia. Who knows what onomatopoeia is? Onomatopoeia. It's a good spelling bee word. Yeah, so people are saying it's sound words, absolutely. So the way that I would define it is words that imitate or mimic the sounds they describe.
And everyone, you can type into the chat if you have any questions, and Olga, just check your phone for a minute. You can type into the chat any questions that you have, okay? So please use that opportunity, okay? So everyone just take this opportunity right now to type any questions that you have, because we're going to start doing test questions shortly.
Okay, what are some examples of onomatopoeia? Yeah, you guys got it. Boom, kapow.
You guys are so smart. Who wants to lead the next webinar next year, 2024?
There are some that are a little bit more like subtle that I want you guys to know also. So even a word like the bees buzzed. So that word buzz, it literally sounds like the buzz of a bee. Another example is like tick tock of the clock. The tick tock sound literally sounds like what those what are they called? The arrows of the clock sound like. So these are important. And then the reason why authors may use this is because these are bringing sensory experiences to life. So the same way that we use imagery, we use sound to also evoke those same feelings, as if that you're there, as if that you literally can hear the tick-tock of the clock, or as if you literally can hear the bees buzzing. So the reason that we use this is to bring sensory experiences to life, very similarly to how we use imagery in our writing.
And I want to just remind everyone that we are, number one, doing our recording right now, number one. And number two, we are going to share these notes with you, so you'll have that option as well. So you'll have these notes, which Olga is painfully writing by hand right now as we are in the good notes. Okay.
Okay, and then just to contrast onomatopoeia with imagery, we already kind of verbally defined it, but I want you guys just to have it again in the notes. So who can come up with a definition for imagery, even though we've already kind of talked about it? So in imagery, yeah, we use the 5 senses. So we use vivid and descriptive language to create sensory experiences for our reader. And the purpose is very similar to onomatopoeia. We're just trying to make our reader feel as if they're there. But it's broader. Instead of just sound, we focus on all the 5 senses. So we want to focus on what something looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it feels like. So we can say something like the aroma of freshly baked bread overcame my nose. And this is the part that's imagery, the freshly baked bread. Sure, I could go back.
But we're emailing this to you anyway, so we don't need to spend too much time on the page. And I want to get to the test questions.
Okay, so there's more and more and more. There's infinite, not infinite, but there's very, very many literary devices that we can define, and we can give you examples. But as Francis said, I think it's important for us to get to the test questions. The last thing that I'll say before we do that is just a quick idea of transition words. So Kenny did this as well, but I just want you guys to know that it's important to know different categories of transition words. And when you see the transition words, you know that the author is using them for whatever that purpose is, depending on the type of transition words. So there are a few categories that I just want you guys to think about. There is addition, when we're trying to add something. There is contrast or comparison, when we're trying to say how things are similar, how things are similar or different. There is cause and effect, when we're trying to say how one thing led to another. There is summary or conclusion. There's emphasis. And there's more, but these are the ones that I think are important to know, especially in the purpose of poetry, especially with emphasis. And we can just verbally talk about some of them. So what words do you guys know that signify addition?
It's
Rapid
fine.
fire.
We can add like 2 examples of each, but then after this, I want to shift over to questions.
Sure. So we can just say additionally, also, furthermore. Okay, next, how about for contrast or comparison? How about however, but? This is a really big one that's very, very commonly used. And also for comparison, we can say similarly. Okay, next for cause and effect, therefore, consequently, because. And then for summary or conclusion, that's words like finally. Sometimes they make it really obvious and say in conclusion. And then for emphasis, we can say of course, without a doubt, especially, above all. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump to a practice question. So this poem that I'm going to put up, this one right here that you guys should see on your screen, it's called Letter from Brooklyn. It came from the SHSAT handbook, so it's from that practice test.
So the handbook is already linked in the text, the easy text that we sent out to you. If you want, we can also, I can put this into the chat, but this is in the actual SHSAT handbook, which there's a digital copy of, and all of you should have that link. I can add that into the chat if you need as well. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so we see the poem. So automatically we're going to start employing all the strategies that we've talked about, right? So one thing that I noticed right away is the form of the poem, right? So from this poem, I don't see any specific form. I don't see any breaks. It's just one large stanza. I don't see any obvious shape. So none of that is relevant for this particular poem that we have. What is relevant is I see a title. So I'm always going to read my title. It says Letter from Brooklyn. So already we can think, okay, Brooklyn is a place that most of us know growing up in New York City. So most likely this may have to do with the geographical location, right? So I don't know 100%, but I'm just trying to show you guys kind of like get the wheels turning of how my brain works as soon as I start reading that. And then before we get into the poem, I can already see all these personal pronouns, right? Just in the first two lines, I see the word I repeat. And as we go on, like without even reading it, just skimming it, I see myself, I see me. So what I know is that this is a personal poem, right? This is written from first person point of view. So whoever is this author, Jacob is telling me his story, right? So it's first author. So these are all the things that I noticed, and now I feel pretty ready to start reading the poem. The only other thing that I'll point out here, which isn't relevant just for the poem, it's relevant for you guys in general in the SHSAT, is sometimes they do this for you guys where they define certain words. So always pay attention to these subscripts or superscripts rather, because they're defining the words for you guys. So definitely take advantage of that. Okay, so now without further ado, let's read the poem out loud. So I'm going to read it out loud to you guys, and then I'll go back and I'll point out different things that I would pay attention to as I'm reading, okay? So it says, I can already see how this will end, how I will grow tired of the bridge's steep incline and the absent-minded tourists wandering into the bicycle path. The weather will turn cold, but that all happens later. For now, it is the early edge of fall, leaves green still while the air narrows, is slightly crisp, almost grazing, the hair of my arm like a passing stranger, as though the air has been forced into intimacy by the brevity of daylight. But when it starts darkening at 4, this closeness, I know, will be a felt distance, like someone drawing your attention to their lack of intimacy. These days, I am still walking at a cathedral pace, beneath the branches bending across avenues, brownstones like rows of lived-in chapels. Like a pop-up picture book I could have had as a child, but didn't. How Brooklyn makes me nostalgic for the moment I am walking inside of. These late afternoons filled with a loneliness that makes me feel distinctly myself and an awareness of how rare that is. Okay, so that was our first sort of read through of it. Let's talk about some things that we can notice in this poem. So the author says, I can already see how this will end. Already and this. How I will grow tired of the bridge's steep incline and the absent-minded tourists. So the bridge's steep incline, and then we have the absent-minded tourist wandering into the bicycle path.
Oh, can you make the screen larger?
Sure. Is this good?
Yes.
Okay, so
Perfect. Okay. Go ahead.
why did I underline bridges, steep incline, and absent-minded tourists wandering into the bicycle path? So all of these two things are what we call like details, right? They're specific forms of details describing what the author means, what specifically they'll grow tired of. And they are both very descriptive of Brooklyn, right? So when he says the bridges, we can imagine perhaps he's talking about the Brooklyn Bridge. And when he's talking about Brooklyn, it's very common for us to associate Brooklyn or the city with like bicyclists and tourists. So all of these are key words for me to help understand like my setting of what he's talking about. So the poem is definitely about Brooklyn. And these are little pieces that I can prove to myself that it's really about the geographical place of Brooklyn, right? Pieces of evidence. And then they tell us we become more specific in the setting, not that just the geographical place of Brooklyn, but later on we get the season, right? The author tells us it's the early edge of fall. So what can he mean by early edge of fall? So this is a figurative way of telling us that it's the beginning of fall, right? Early edge of fall. It's almost like a metaphor here. So he's telling us that it's the beginning of fall in a literary way. And he's telling us that using this line, but he also tells us the weather will turn cold, but that all happens later, right? So that hasn't happened yet. It's not winter yet, it's fall. And then we're describing the leaves still while the air narrows. So that means the leaves are still green, right? Fall didn't start yet, it didn't complete yet, right? So the leaves haven't changed color. So that's why the author is telling us that the leaves are still green. So all of this is still kind of helping me establish my setting and describe like exactly what the author is talking about. The air is narrowing though, so it's getting a little bit cold, he's telling us, and it's slightly crisp, almost grazing the hair of his arm like a passing stranger. So what is this that I'm highlighting here? What literary device is this? Yeah, good. So this is a simile. So it's comparing the way that when a stranger passes you and can touch you, that's how a little bit colder air feels. So we have some literary devices here. As though the air has been forced into intimacy by the brevity of daylight, by the briefness of daylight. So he's saying that, again, this is another comparison, right? Using like or as. So we have two similes back to back in these two lines. And then we have a transition word. So what did we say but is? What kind of transition word is this? So but is for contrast, right? So but somewhere right in the middle of the poem is signifying that we're getting a little bit of a switch, right? But something is different. But when it starts darkening at 4, so now we're switching, right? Because it starts darkening at 4 closer to the winter time. This closeness, I know, will be a felt distance, like someone drawing your attention to their lack of intimacy. So this is going to change, right? This beauty and these feelings that he's describing about the earliness of fall are going to change when it becomes winter. That's what this part is telling us. And then if we keep dissecting this poem, it says, these days I am still walking at a cathedral pace, beneath the branches, bending across avenues, brownstones like rows of lived-in chapels. So again, brownstones is a very, very telltale sign of like New York and Brooklyn. So that's another sort of detail that the author is throwing in there. And then we have another simile over here, like a pop-up book, picture book I could have had as a child. So here's another simile. And then notice punctuation, right? So we haven't seen this before in this poem, but nowhere else did the sentence kind of complete in the middle of a line and a new sentence began, right? This is the first place. So remember that I told you guys to pay attention to patterns or when patterns change. So this is what I mean by notice grammar. So why would the author choose to do that? Why not make a new line? So how Brooklyn makes me feel nostalgic for the moment I'm walking inside of. What does this line mean? Nostalgic means that yearning of the past. And the author is saying that he feels like he's yearning for the past at the very moment that he's in. So he's nostalgic for the moment that he's in. So that's a very specific feeling and line that he's saying. So that's a very important part of the poem. It's almost like the moral or the summary of the poem. So it's not a coincidence that the grammar changed there as well. These late afternoons filled with a loneliness that makes me feel distinctly myself and an awareness of how rare that is. So this is kind of like the big ending of like how Brooklyn actually makes him feel. Specifically this time of day in Brooklyn, this season of beginning of fall, kind of the way that we're in right now, like mid-September. Does that make sense? Okay, so does anybody have any questions about anything from this poem before we sort of get to the questions? The way we dissected it or read it together? Okay, so then let's go ahead and start. So how does the structure of the poem affect the poem's meaning? So this is a type of question that Kenny discussed with us, right? So structure of a poem affect the poem's meaning. So what is the way that the poem is actually put together? How does that contribute to its meaning? So I want you guys to think about this question for a second by yourself. And then we will review it, okay? So I'm gonna give everybody 1 minute to think about it by themselves. You guys can start putting your answers in the chat or the answers that you've eliminated in the chat or just thoughts that you have as you're reading this, and then we'll review it, okay? Okay, so I see a lot of answers. I see a lot of people eliminating the same answers. So let's think through this. So what do we think about choice E? Let's read choice E together. The lack of a rhyming pattern. So far that's true, right? The poem does lack a rhyming pattern. So this part is true. So the reason I'm breaking it up like that is because if the poem had a rhyming pattern, at that point, we would be able to eliminate it right away. But the way that it stands so far, that's true. There is a lack of a rhyming pattern. Now we have to think, does that suggest that the beauty of each passing day is unique? Now we have to think, is that related at all to the uniqueness of the passing day? So the beauty that the author, this poem talks about has to do with fall, right? It has to do with Brooklyn. It doesn't really have to do with passing days. Does that make sense? So there's nothing in the poem that kind of suggests anything about each day being unique or the days passing. And additionally, the poem seems to be more focused on seasonal shifts, right? So we're talking about fall turning into winter rather than the shifts of each passing day. So the latter part of the answer choice is not screaming to me that that's what the poem is about. So I would be very hesitant to pick that. So I would move on to the next one. Now, the next one says the lengths of the sentences represent the complexity of the thoughts being represented. So I think this is an an interesting one because the poem actually has a good variety of sentence structures, right? So some sentences are very short, just one line, and some of them are longer, 3 lines. But I don't see any pattern that the length of the sentences are reflected of the complexity of the thoughts that the author is trying to say. So how I will grow tired of the bridge's steep incline and the absent-minded tourist wandering into the bicycle path is not any more of a complex sentence than the weather will turn cold. So I think F is a kind of an easy one to eliminate right away because I do not think this is true. And also because the lengths of the sentences are variable here. Okay, next, the use of complete sentences implies the speaker's appreciation for the clear beginning and ending of each season. So again, this one is an interesting one. So I don't think that the poem is concerned with the speaker's thoughts on the beginning and ending of each season. It just talks about specifically the beginning of the fall season in it of itself. So I think that this is too broad of an answer choice. I don't think that what the author is trying to say is relevant for every season. I think his point is more specific to this specific instance of the beginning of fall in Brooklyn. So I think this choice is too broad. So I'd be comfortable with eliminating that one as well. And then the last choice, the single long stanza. So this part again is true. And that's something that we noticed in the beginning when I said, guys, look at the form. I see just one long stanza, right? It doesn't have any specific shape. Reflects the continuous flow of the speaker's thoughts. So the poem is not broken up into smaller stanzas. That's true. I think that this structure does show that there's sort of this interrupted flow of the speaker's thoughts from time to time. And it kind of, remember when I said that it's a personal point of view, so we saw personal pronouns, it's kind of giving like stream of consciousness. Does that make sense? Like this is how the author feels as they're walking through the streets of Brooklyn at this particular season, and how they feel nostalgic and how they feel kind of lonely but happy at the same time. So this particular mix of emotions, and they are just kind of giving us the stream of consciousness, which is why the author didn't choose to break it up. So I think the best answer here is choice H. And excellent for those of you that got it. For those of you that were confused, is it more clear now? Did I explain why the choice that you guys originally thought is not the best one? Okay, any questions? Okay, let's move on to number 19. So this says, which lines support the idea that a change in the weather will lessen the speaker's appreciation for the city? So we're looking for change in the weather. So we remember them talking about that. And we're talking about lessen. So he's going to like it less. So again, I'll give you guys a minute to do this by yourself. And then we'll go through it. Yeah, good. So this one seems a little bit more straightforward. So you guys are all getting this one. So first, notice that it starts with but. So we talked about but being a transition word, right? So but kind of aligns with this part, change. So there's always going to be a transition word when there's a change. So a change in the weather, but adds up to that. And then when it starts darkening at 4, that's the change in the weather, right? Because when it starts darkening at 4, that symbolizes that it's going to be winter. And then this closeness, I know, will be a felt distance. So a felt distance means that I'm not going to feel that closeness, right? Instead, I'm going to feel separation, distance, right? So distance has a connotation that's a little bit more negative. So that helps us get this part of the question, lessen. Does that make sense? If we look at some of the other options, just to prove to us, just to help us eliminate them, by the brevity of daylight. This part is more positive, and this more intimacy, this is before the change in the weather, right? And we see these are lines 11 to 12. This is the part where he's talking about how he likes the fall, right? So this is positive, so it's not going to be choice A. And then choice C, like someone drawing your attention to their lack of intimacy, is already past the part where he's talking about the weather. So that's here. So that's an extension of the right choice, but that by itself doesn't tell us anything about the changing weather. So that's why B is better. And then finally, D, 17 to 18. These days, I'm still walking at a cathedral. So again, this is talking about these days, meaning right now during the fall. So this is, we transitioned back to the fall time. So that's why this is no good, because this is still talking about fall, not the winter. So the problem here is between choices B and C. This is where you guys should have been stuck between. And the reason B is better is because it actually tells us about the change in the weather, the darkening at 4, and the lessons of the speaker's appreciation, felt distance. So both parts of the question are addressed in that one line alone. C is an extension of those negative feelings, but just alone without any context doesn't answer the question completely, which is what makes B the best option here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so now let's look at 20. So this is asking us to read lines 5 and 6 of the poem. So I'll read that for us. It says, the weather will turn cold, but that all happens later. So again, we have but here, which is a transition word. So what are these two lines? How do they develop a central theme of the poem? And that also begs the question of what is the central theme in this poem? So you guys can take a second to look at the answer choices and try to think about which one describes the theme of the poem and has to do with these lines as well. So we've got a lot of mixed answers here, right? But this line comes from the beginning of the poem. So it's important that we kind of establish a theme for ourselves right at the start, right? So the author starts with that he can see how this will end, right? The weather will turn cold, but that all happens later. And then we say, for now, it is the early edge of fall. And the author starts telling us about all these positive things in fall, right? All these things that make him happy. And later on, he talks about the moment that I am walking inside of, right? This part is one that we talked about a lot for. So I think this line and this line together really help us determine the theme of the poem. And a big theme of the poem is to focus on the present, right? The importance of savoring right now. So focus on present, savoring right now. So together, these two lines really help us emphasize that, right? He knows that how this will end. He knows that it's going to be winter, and he knows that he's going to appreciate everything less, but all that happens later. For now, let him describe to us how intimate and how amazing and how good this time of year feels for him, and the feelings that this time of year evokes for him, and how that makes him feel sort of that he's a moment that he's walking inside of. He's already nostalgic for that moment, for that present moment, right? So all of that kind of points us to the right answer, as many of you guys said, this part here, valuing the present, choice H. I want to talk about some of the answers that you guys were unsure between. So some of you were thinking about F, that they show a sequence of changes that are expected to occur. So the problem with F is that it shows one change, right? The weather will turn cold. So this is just one change. So with the answer choices, it's okay to be very literal when you're trying to eliminate options. So again, these lines, this is not true. They do not show a sequence of changes. They show one change, which is that the season's expected to change. So that would help you eliminate F, just to be very literal with your answer choices and be very kind of like mean when you're trying to eliminate, right? Like be a very strict teacher with yourself and ask yourself, does this do that? Do these lines show me a sequence of changes? No, they only show me one change that's expected to occur. So that's unlikely to be true. And additionally, that it also is not sort of like the main idea of the poem either. Because if we go back to the poem right after lines 5 to 7, it actually goes back to the present, right? So right after those lines, it says for now. So instead of showing the changes that are about to occur, it's actually focusing on the present. And that's why context is important. And that's why it's important to not only read the lines that they're giving you, but to go back, and then you'll see that line 7 starts with for now. And that really supports the present part in choice H. Does that make sense to everybody?
Olga, can you shrink the screen back so that it's a little bit smaller so now everyone will see? And we'll go back to the earlier question set. Good. So here's the poem, here are the questions. And then if you can zoom in question 18, we're going to do some like ninja strategies. Okay, ready? All right. How does the structure of the poem between the word poem and 100%? What word do you think Francis Kweller wants to put between the word poem and effect? Anybody? 100%. Clearly, Olga, you have attended these webinars. So you need to say a maybe answer or a guaranteed answer, right? So let's reread this. Olga, can you please reread this? How does
the structure of the poem 100% affect the poem's meaning? So again,
this is perfect.
We're looking for a choice that shows us how the structure definitively 100,000,000% focuses or changes the poem's meaning. So like we discussed, that long stanza affects the poem's meaning by reflecting that it's the stream of consciousness as they're talking to us. They're just reflecting on their thoughts nonstop. That's why the author didn't put any breaks of stanzas there.
Okay, ready? We're going to repeat this, and my 2.5-year-old is going to tell you what you need to know. Ready? We're going to say this again. Ready, Jacob? We're going to say 100%. Say 100%. 100%. We're going to reread this. Ready? 100%. Say, everyone, repeat after me. Is it 98%, 99%, or 100%? 100%. Yes. Okay, so let's read the next question. Ready? Which lines support the idea? Guess what word I want between the word lines and support? Do I want to put 98, 99, or 100%? What do you think I want in the middle? Ready? Which lines 100% support the idea that a change in the weather will lessen? 100%. You get it? Do you see how that helps you? Next. Ready? Next question. Read lines 5 to 6 in the poem. How do the lines between the word lines and develop? This is what I did for my bar exam, by the way, and LSAT and all of my high stakes testing. How do the lines 100% develop? Am I going to write 99%, 98%, or 100%? Who can tell me what we're writing? 100%, the central theme of the poem. Excellent. Okay, next question. Ready, Olga? Without further ado, should we just go straight into the 100% game here? Or should we, how about we go 100% and then you'll do your part, then I'll do mine. Ready? The word choice in the lines. Guess what I want between the word lines and helps? Olga, you've had way too many of these webinars because you know all the answers. Next question. The details in lines 9 to 12. Guess what I want between 12 and convey? 100%. Even better. That's even better. Next, ready? Which idea does the comparison of the brownstone houses to a pop-up picture book I could have had as a child but didn't. In lines 20 to 21, 100% convey. Do you see how you need a definitive answer? Got it? It's either 100% right or it's wrong. Let's write that down in the bottom. It's either 100% right or it's wrong. Okay. For some reason, I find it so calming, so therapeutic that Olga's writing all these answers out. Okay, let's go, guys. Ready? We're going to say one more time. Repeat after me. 100%. Repeat after me. 100%. Okay, let's keep going. Without further ado, Olga, take it over.
Okay, so let's get through this set of questions. So now let's read lines 7 to 9 from the poem. So these are right after the lines that we were talking about before. So before it was saying, the weather will turn cold, but all that happens later for now, right? This is the part that showed us that the author is focusing on the present. So for now, it is the early edge of fall, leaves green still while the air narrows, right? Still, so again, that's similar to for now, like we're in the now, is slightly crisp. So the word choice in the lines helps convey the speaker's belief in what? So A, the beauty of the current season should still be appreciated. So I think the key word in choice A is current, right? Because I'm trying to show you guys that the author is furthering this theme of focusing on the present. We have for now, we have the word still, and now we have the word current. Those all go, if I draw you guys like this little umbrella here, they all go under the same umbrella. All those words, still, current, for now, they all fall under this one umbrella. So it's really important that you guys focus on how words are connected to each other. And we pick words that are connected to the words in the poem, that are connected to the words in the question. So for now, still, current, choice A is our answer here. The changes in the weather signify the end of the most pleasant season. While this may be true, the author is not trying to focus on the end. The author is trying to still focus on the fact that he's enjoying the season right now, not that the season is ending. And also this part, the most pleasant season, are you 100% sure? So we want to avoid very extreme answer choices, right? So nothing is the most, nothing is the greatest, nothing is the funniest. We avoid words like that. So this is too strong of an answer choice with the word most here. So that would help me eliminate choice B. So you avoid extreme choices. So words like most, words like always, words like never. So extreme in either category, in either direction, is a choice that you're avoiding on this exam. Next, the transition from one season to another happens swiftly and without warning. Again, that's not true, right? Because there's all these subtleties and nuances, right? The early edge of fall, the air is narrowing. There's all these indications from these phrases that there's these small subtleties of the seasons changing, right? So it's more gradual in how the author is describing it. So there's nothing that suggests swiftly and without warning. So we're able to eliminate choice C. And then this one is the opposite, right? It is subtle, but it's not that people rarely observe or feel it, because this author is feeling it. And they are telling us. And additionally, this is a personal statement. This is a personal poem, right? We saw words like I and me and myself, and I told you guys that this is first person. So you're never going to pick a choice that has to do with people in a poem that's first person, because this is just telling us the author's point of view. But the answer is trying to say people, so that's the disconnect, and that's the part that would help us eliminate choice D. Okay, moving further along through the poem, this is asking us about the lines 9 to 12, and they don't give us these lines. So unfortunately, we have to go back to the poem and reread 9 to 12. So in 9 to 12, we see that the air is slightly crisp, almost grazing the hair of my arm like a passing stranger, as though the air has been forced into intimacy by the brevity of daylight. So I'm going to rewrite just the important parts here. So these parts are saying we have intimacy of daylight, and we have like a passing stranger. Okay, so choice E is saying showing that the cool weather makes the speaker reflect more deeply on life. So although the speaker is talking about the colder weather, like the wind grazing his arm, he doesn't reflect more deeply on life in those specific lines. That happens later. So that would help me eliminate choice E. F, suggesting that the speaker feels uncomfortable with what the weather. So I think that the speaker is actually trying to describe like the physical sensation of touching it, of the colder air touching him. I don't think it's anything negative here. I think it's still more positive about the part of the weather that he likes. So I would eliminate that because uncomfortable is a more negative word. Then we have G, implying that the sensations the speaker experiences during the fall season are fleeting. This, I think, is true, right? That's why the whole point is to focus on the present, because he knows that it's going to leave soon. And if we look at the words that the author uses, passing stranger. So passing and fleeting, again, they're words that go under the same umbrella. Just as the stranger is passing, in the same way, this part of the season is very fleeting. And then the other word that he suggests is also brevity of daylight. So brevity also means like it's very brief, it's very fast. So passing stranger, brevity, fleeting, all of those are words that you guys should connect. And that's why the answer here is G. Does that make sense? And then finally, the last one on this page, which idea does the comparison of the brownstone houses to a pop-up picture I could have had as a child but didn't? In lines 20 to 21 convey. So A, reveals that some people are still influenced by powerful images from childhood. Although this does remind something from childhood, it's not, this word is what makes me stray away from that. It's not something powerful, right? Because especially it's something that he didn't even have. So I would stray away from the word powerful. B, it indicates that the neighborhood the speaker is walking through is charming and appealing. So these are positive words, charming and appealing, but they're not as personal, right? So again, some people, this is the same argument as here, right? We were not talking about some people. We're talking about the speaker, right? As opposed to here, the speaker. So that's what makes choice B a better choice here. And it's charming and appealing because it's just like something that you would see in a picture book, right? Something that you would read to kids and it would pop up and it would be beautiful and appealing. And that's why choice B is the best answer here. C, it suggests that the speaker has wanted to live in this neighborhood since childhood. That's not true, right? This is a too much answer choice, too far. And we don't really know if maybe he does live there, maybe he doesn't. We just don't know that. And then D, it suggests that people often experiencing lingering regret from their past. Again, we don't want to talk about people, right? This is a personal poem about the author, the speaker. So why would it suggest something about people in general? And it doesn't talk about anything to do with regret from the past either. It just mentions like the pop-up book from like the pop-up book isn't regret. Does that make sense? It's just something that a lot of kids have when they're little, they have pop-up books. All right, so we have 3 more questions to finish up this poem, and we'll be right on time for 9 p.m. and hopefully have some time at the end for some questions. So next, read these lines from the poem. I can already—
So is it okay if I go through the 100% piece again? Is that okay? We'll start with that.
Yeah.
Okay, read these lines from the poem, blah, 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 blah. The lines develop. The lines develop. Guess where I want to put 100%? The lines 100% develop. Do they 80% develop, 90% develop, or 100% develop? They 100% develop. Got it? Next. The speaker's thoughts throughout the poem, again, gosh, this word develop is very popular here. So we'll make it zoom again. 100% develop. Got it? Next, the post. You know, they're really not original when they do these things. Guess what word we see again and again and again? What's the big word here? Develops. Who can spell the word develop with their eyes closed? D-E-V-E-L-O-P. No E. So you'll notice they're not original here. It's not that clever. They're using the same word. What's the central idea? The speaker's thoughts are developed how? The poet develops the point of view how. So like these are not really that hard. If you really think about it, this isn't that hard in terms of the questions they're asking. Okay. Olga, as we're finishing up, just be mindful that you have 5 minutes to produce answers. So let's torpedo through this because we want to wind down and we definitely want to start saying thank you to Olga for this time. Okay, so go ahead. Have fun, Olga. Good luck getting 3 questions done in, I guess we can allocate 8 minutes. Let's go.
Okay, so it shouldn't be that bad because we talked about all these things already. And as Francis is saying, they're not so original. It keeps repeating. So I can already see how this will end, right? So again, those personal pronouns and this word end, how Brooklyn makes me nostalgic for the moment I am walking inside of. So how are these developing a central point in this poem? So what they're emphasizing again is something that we already talked about, which is this main idea of the present moment, right? Of savoring the present moment and constantly feeling nostalgic for the moment that you're in, even before it's over, right? This weird feeling that this speaker is having. And the choice that signifies that and that gives us this present moment line is choice G. And it's emphasizing that the speaker is aware of the future significance of this present moment in the setting. He's aware that this is an important feeling, a calm feeling, a good feeling that he's having. And he's also aware that it's going to end, which is why he already feels nostalgic for it. If we quickly run through the other answer choices just to eliminate them, speakers desire to find a way to break through the repetitive pattern of daily life. Nothing suggesting of that. Desire for freedom is not something that we see in the poem. Although that we see some sort of repetitive pattern here, like how this will end, we can kind of see that, but there's nothing. It doesn't suggest that the speaker wants to break free from these natural changes. It actually kind of suggests that he likes those natural changes. So not that one. Feelings of disappointment over the predictable change in the season. Again, although he acknowledges that he might be disappointed, he's recognizing the value of enjoying the present moment. So I would not pick an answer choice that's negative like this. So not F. And then finally, H, anticipation of specific moments. He's aware that specific emotions will occur in the later, but this awareness is only part of the complex central idea of the poem, which is that we have to appreciate our current emotions. So not H either. Okay, running through the next one. The speaker's thoughts throughout the poem develop a theme by showing that choice A, although people may hold expectations of the future, some people long for present experiences while they are still happening. Absolutely. So that's exactly what this is saying. The nostalgic part, waiting, hoping for the moment that you're actually walking inside of. That's exactly this. And I will say that looking at all of these options, what I was telling you guys about before, not to pick a choice with people, that's generally true, but you'll notice that in this answer choice, all the options have people, which is why it's okay. And then finally, the last one, how does the poet develop the speaker's point of view? Our answer here for the last one is choice H. Again, it's showing to treasure and appreciate that changes taken by. Again, the key words is treasure, appreciate the current moment, live in the current moment. So we see those themes kind of keep repeating. Okay, so I torpedoed through these last 3, so I just want to give you guys a moment for any questions. Thank you for all your thank yous in the chat. I really, really appreciate it. Again, we will send you out these notes in this recording. Please ask me any questions in these last few minutes just to make this as beneficial and useful to you guys as possible. I hope that you learned a lot. And as Miss Francis was saying, and as Kenny was telling us before, the test is not easy, right? I'm not going to tell you guys that it's super easy, but there are patterns that repeat, and those patterns is what's going to make you guys successful. You have to notice those patterns. You have to ingrain those patterns in the way that you think. And you have to learn the keywords and all that kind of stuff, the literary devices that they use and what they're used for. And you look at those patterns, and that's what's going to help you guys get these answers right.
Everyone, we are so lucky because we are about to finish up the webinar. And as we finish up the webinar, you get to see a cute child. Ready? Come here, cute child. Grr. Hello, look at that face. Hello, say hi, Olga.
Hi, Olga.
Say, Olga, you're the best. Wait, can you put on
Hi.
spotlight? Say, Olga, you're the best.
Olga, back.
Olga, can you put on spotlight? It's good. Olga, you're the best.
Olga, back.
Olga, you're the best SHSAT teacher ever. Next, now you're gonna see the cute little dog. Goldie, come. Ready? Who wants to see the dog? Ready? Wait. Can you get me Goldie? Get me Goldie. Ready? Everyone, wait. Say, Olga, you're the best. Here, Goldie. Ready? Wait. Ugh. Sorry, sharing the spotlight with the dog. He's not like great on FaceTime. I'll do my best, guys. Oh my gosh. Wait. Do you see him? Hold on. We're doing our best here. I don't know. I'll try to work on this idea. Hold on, guys. Okay, everyone, here's what I want to do. Ready? We are going to take a moment. Ready? We are going to take a moment to go off mute, and we're going to say, hold on, everybody. I'm trying to get this dog. This is very complicated. Hold on. This is very important. Ready? Okay, I'm going to put the dog towards the screen. Here, Goldie. They don't do face recognition on dogs. This is very important. I'm going to take everyone off mute. Okay. And we're going to say thank you to Olga for doing this webinar. Oh, good. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So good. So we're going to take you off mute, and everyone, we're going to count to 3. Jacob, are you going to count? 1, 2, 3. We're gonna sing thank you, Olga.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank you, Olga.
Olga, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Olga.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank you,
Olga.
guys.
Say thank you
Надо это любимое записать, чтобы
Мгм.
сделать.
so much. 1, 2, 3, go. Say, Olga, thank you so much.
Olga,
Ready?
thank you all so much.
Olga, thank you so much. Say, you're the best.
The best.
Okay. Everyone, we're gonna have
you.
Goldie say goodbye. Again, I'm trying the facial recognition with the dog. It's not going so great. Here, I'm trying Goldie. Hi, Goldie.
Thank you, Olga.
All right, everyone. Thank you, guys. You did a wonderful job. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who participated in this webinar, because this was a big deal. Say thank you, Olga. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, Olga, you did a wonderful job as always.
you,
We're gonna keep
guys.
going. Say, Olga, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this great experience. Okay.
Thank you, guys. Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you, everyone. All right, everyone, we're winding down. Olga, no biggie, just another night at Kweller Prep, just 200 random. It's all right, guys. All right, we're very proud of you. We're gonna keep going, keep studying. Don't forget.
Yes, keep
So
studying.
cute and so smart. I'm so proud of all of you. You're very, very, very smart. I'm really proud of you. Okay, say thank you. Got it? All right, we're winding down. We're done. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Well, Olga, back to medical school. It's not like you get a break. Show me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Say, Jacob, what are you doing? What are you doing? Jacob, say thank you.
Thank you.
Say thank you, Olga. Say thank you, Olga. I think that's all he
Jacob,
knows
how
how to
old
say.
are you?
Jacob, how old are you?
Half.
He's 2.5.
2.5.
Are you showing all your feet? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Are those your pajamas? What do you have in your pajamas? Planets?
Oh,
He's so cute.
That's it. He's done. He's done.
He's done with
Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for participating in our Kweller Prep webinar. Olga, you'll send me the notes and I'm going to have the video. I'm going to upload everything for tomorrow. Thank you. That's it. This is our last goodbye. Say bye. You want to show Olga your water bottle? Show her your water bottle.
Wow. What color is that?
Oh,
Purple.
say bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Good night, everybody. Good luck, guys.
Disappeared into the blue universe. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful webinar. Ready? We're finishing up, everyone.
Bye, guys. I'm going to end the meeting. Good night, everybody. Thank you.